So we are going to be looking at task 8, but we know that in task 7 we implemented this extract base 64 authorization header method that extracts the base 64 credentials. That is, we only extracted here. So for this method, what we are going to do is we are going to decode the extracted base 64 credentials. That is, we are going to decode it back to a human readable string and then return it for further processing. That is, decode it from base 64 to something we can read. So let's get started. The first check here, we are going to check if base 64, if this is provided. If it's not provided, we are going to return none. So you say if it's not provided, return none. And then we are going to check if it's a string. So we are going to use the is instance. So we are going to check if base 64 authorization header is not an instance of a string, we are going to return none. And then we also to return none if base 64 header is not a valid base 64. So okay, we can use try and except. So what we are going to do is we are going to say, okay, let's not forget we are going to use this base 64 that we imported there, or we can just say from base 64 import base 64. Yeah, so we are going to use this to check if this base 64 string, that is the one we got from here, we are going to use the base 64 module to check if it's a valid base 64. So we are going to say let's say um, so we are going to use this function, the base 64 method to, and then we pass in this base 64 string, that is this one. And then after doing this, we are going to have to, because it's going to be returned in bytes, we are going to have to decode it. So I'll say decoded base 64 is equal to dot decode. So we decode it back to UTF-8, which is string that can be readable by us. And then we close the except. If there is any exception, what we are going to do is to return null. Then finally, if there is no exception, we are going to return the decoded base 64 string. That is, after decoding it, it's going to look something like this: the password, the username, and then the password or email and password, then separated by the delimiter colon. Then we're going to have to test it out. So I guess here In this function, we are saying if it's none, we are going to return none. So this one should return none. If it's not a string, return none. This one should return none. Then it is a string here, but it's not a valid base 64 string because this is readable. This is normal UTF-8, decoded UTF-8. So it's going to return none. Then not really sure about this, but I believe let's just what food are we? Okay, API. This is auth, yes. Well, line 63. Let me see. Okay, this is what we got. So see that. Okay, I guess this is a valid base 64. This is a valid base 64. Then this one too. This is a valid one because here we are passing in the extra base 64 authorization header, which is going to split this by the space and then return this part, which is base 64 string, and then this decode function is going to the code method is going to decode this part of it and is going to return Hobart in school. So I think let's immediately look at, I'll take this out, the tax 9, which is what I've prepared here. Let me take this off, which is what I've prepared here. So in tax 9, we are going to implement method that's going to take this decoded base 64 string that is now human readable to separate the email or the username and then the password by the delimiter that is taking off this colon. But as usual, always we have to put all these checks before we can be able to do that. So for this task, we are expected to return a tuple of two values. That should be in the zero should be email or username and then followed by the password. So we have to return a tuple of none if the decoded base 64 header is none. So we are going to say if not, then we return a tuple of none, and then if the decoded base 64 authorization header is not a string, we also return a tuple of none. So we say if it's not an instance of a string, we are to return a tuple of none, and then this one says to return none if this base 64 authorization header doesn't contain the delimiter. So we are going to say if a colon is not in decoded base 64 header, we are going to return tuple of none as well, and then otherwise we should return the user email and the user password. Then these two values must be separated by a colon. Then we should always assume that the decoded base 64 header will contain only one colon for now. So we know that. So for now, because a password could contain special character like a colon. So for now, we shouldn't bother about having another colon in this set. So what we are going to do here is okay, we are going to say user and pwd. Okay, pwd is equal to, so we are going to split these into two. So when we split these into two, we are going to be left with the list Johnson at index 0 and pass at index 1. So that's why we are unpacking them into these two variables. So Johnson will be unpacked to the user and the password will be unpacked to the PWD. So we say decoded base 64 authorization header dot split. We call the split function on it, and then we're going to be splitting it by the delimiter, and then afterwards we return a tuple of the user and the PWD. So let's go ahead and test this. So here this should return none because decoded base 64 is none. This should also return none because decoded base 64 is an integer, and this should always return tuple of none because there is no colon that is for this check. And then there's a colon here. This should return Hobarton and school, and this also should return the email and the total 1234. So let's run this again. Okay, so let's go to the next one, which should be tax 10.